Good morning. I'm Harley Schlanger from the LaRouche Organization with your daily video update for November 21st, 2023. I'm going to be discussing something today which is a painful topic, but which is being blissfully ignored by the imbeciles running the world economy as a unipolar order, which is that what we're actually seeing is the rapid decline of the West, the disintegration of an imperial system which should disintegrate, which should be pushed out of the way to clear the way for a new, just economic and development order based on the mutual collaboration of sovereign nation states, but which, as in the case of most decaying imperial orders, is imposing its will on the world at the risk of accelerated conflict, wars, and mass death. Now, this was addressed by someone in the last couple of days, and it was mentioned by Helga Zepp-LaRouche in a discussion yesterday. What happens in a firm if the business model used to build the firm no longer works? If instead of producing profits and increased productivity, the opposite occurs: debt, collapse of production, and so on. Do its officials cling tighter to the failed model and refuse to acknowledge its failure and recognize that it's due to a flaw in the system or the system itself? Or do they fix it? And that's what we're confronted with internationally right now. The post-1971 order that was then redeveloped or redesigned in 1991, or post-1989, the shift away from the World War II post-war model of the Bretton Woods system based on physical economic production into a casino economy. This system, which has been propped up as through a form of neo-colonial looting, is collapsing. It started with Nixon's move in 1971 to end the Bretton Woods system, to stop the fixed exchange system based on a gold reserve for the dollar. And by 1973, it had moved into the realm of a floating exchange system, which handed speculators the control of the economy in an increasing flood of liquidity going into speculation, financial innovation, and so on, which led to bubbles and collapsed bubbles through the 80s, 90s, all the way up to the most recent bubble that popped in 2019 to 21. Now, in 1971, Lyndon LaRouche warned that to keep this model going would ultimately require a self-cannibalization in the advanced sector. That is, there's only so much loot that can be grabbed from the colonial world, and at a certain point, as the debt continued to accumulate, there would be what was called a primitive accumulation, that is basically theft from the people who produce the wealth in the advanced sector. And that's exactly what we see today. And LaRouche offered an alternative, his International Development Bank in 1975, based on the idea of a return to physical economic goods production based on scientific and technological progress. Well, what do we have today? As this system is collapsing, we have neo-colonial wars, the attack on Russia, the assault on Gaza, and growing poverty in the West, including bankruptcy. And meanwhile, the rich get richer and everyone else gets more desperate. The green model was used to convince people that the problem is too much production and too much consumption. Well, the people who promote the green model, they're not stopping their consumption. They're demanding that the poorest nations adopt policies which will shut down their potential to produce and become modern nation states. This is a rejection of the ideas at the end of World War II of Franklin Roosevelt of how an economy should function, a rejection of what John F. Kennedy was trying to do, and instead a promotion of an old British system, the Malthusian idea that population growth is the problem, consumption growth is the problem, and we need a depopulation. And they created a pseudoscientific cover for it, namely global warming, ecological crisis, and so on. And in reality, it's the imperial wars are conducted against countries which are rejecting this. You go back and look in the last period, and you can see that. But where did it come from? Well, in particular, Henry Kissinger, who was there with Nixon in 1971, and then his successor, Zbigniew Brzezinski, who both reorganized the U.S. policy based on British geopolitical doctrine. In the case of Kissinger, it was based on the Congress of Vienna balance of power theory, which essentially is a move toward a unipolar order. And under Brzezinski, it was to use the clash of civilizations, the idea of the arc of crisis, to use religious warfare, tribal warfare, to destroy nation states which refused to succumb to the idea of a unipolar order. And then we had the neocons with the Wolfowitz doctrine under Bush Jr., Cheney, and so on, who essentially asserted that the U.S. is the only nation which should be allowed to make the policy and make the rules. And so any nation that steps away from that, tries to break out of that, as in the case of Iraq or Libya, is crushed. Now, the global South is rejecting this new imperialism, and they're rallying around the cause of Russia and Ukraine, the development of China, and they're refusing to support the Israeli attacks on Gaza. Now, meanwhile, you hear about the BRICS, the emergence of this new financial system, and there's a lot of hype in the media about the impending collapse of the Chinese economy. Well, did you know that 33% of world GDP growth is due to China? It's not collapsing. In fact, the conferences going on around the world show that more and more countries are moving to integrate themselves with the Belt and Road Initiative. So what's required is not warfare to defend a collapsing order, but a rethinking in the West. Now, look at the rapid deindustrialization of Germany due to the green policies, which has been added to by the destruction of the North Sea pipeline. Not a peep from German leaders. No attempt to determine who is responsible for this, for the act, which was simultaneously an ecological disaster as well as economic warfare against Germany and Europe. Where are the voices that would speak out against these ecological crises and against the warfare? They're being silenced. Now, as Israel is continuing its nonstop bombardment of Gaza, we're seeing growing opposition throughout the world, just as we're seeing growing opposition in the United States to continuing the funding of the Ukraine war. But this opposition is growing in Israel as well. And Jacques Bode, the Swiss intelligence expert, has added his voice to that of Scott Ritter and Colonel Douglas Macgregor, who have said that if Israel continues on this course, it will lead to the destruction of Israel. He said the question is, who will save Israel from Netanyahu? And that's the question that we'll be taking up on Sunday, November 26th. The International Peace Coalition will be holding an event on stopping the bloodshed in Gaza. And I'll be including a link to that, a registration form for that, in the description section. Now, at the same time, the BRICS are having a video conference today. You have Arab and Muslim leaders touring capitals. They were in Beijing yesterday. I think they're in Moscow today, to bring their message of ceasefire, ending the war, and coming up with a solution that serves the interests of both Israel and the Palestinians, which means freeing the Palestinians from the occupation. It makes sense. Why cling to a bankrupt model? Why impose the terms of bankruptcy on the whole world while the people who created the model are jetting around and living on their yachts and their secluded islands and so on? It's time for a change to take place. Join us with the International Peace Coalition. Sign up for our conference and organize your friends. It's time for us to reorganize a model which has failed and whose failure is realized in the form of the destruction of human lives. So thanks for joining me today. I'll be back tomorrow. Remember, tomorrow is the anniversary, the 60th anniversary of the assassination of John F. Kennedy, and I'll have some thoughts about that for you tomorrow.